Are you a people pleaser? I have to admit, I've always related to the people-pleasing part of my nature as a weakness and something that I had to become less of in order to be successful. But today I'm going to share with you a really recent breakthrough that I had around this so-called weakness that will help you own your own strengths and your weaknesses in a whole new way, regardless of whether or not you identify yourself as a people pleaser too. Back to the podcast. I am so grateful that you're spending a little time with us today, and I want to share something that I will be honest, I hesitated in putting out this episode. I've actually had this topic on my mind for a while now, and when I looked at why I was hesitating, it's because this is something that I have always felt is a weakness of mine. And I don't know about you, but who really enjoys talking about their weaknesses to the entire world? Well, I know that talking about these things and helping other women know that they're not alone, and that if you've ever struggled with a people-pleasing tendency, that there's actually some strength to it. So I wanted to share a recent breakthrough that I had in the last 6 months around this, I would say, what I used to think of as a weakness. And it's actually given me a ton of freedom around being 100% who I am and 100% who I am not, which has allowed me just to get out of my own way even more. And you know that that is what this entire show is about, helping you get out of your own way and into action around your big ideas. So when I thought about what I needed more of in order to go to the next level of success or to tackle the big goals that I had, I always thought I needed just more confidence. And I hear a lot of women who will say, if I only had more confidence, I could take that next step. I could go after that promotion, go after that opportunity. And I was in the same boat. I thought what I was looking for was more confidence. But truly, what this whole experience has taught me is that it was actually freedom that I was looking for. The freedom to authentically be myself and all of me, the things that I am, the things that I'm not, and for me to accept all of that first rather than waiting for someone else to accept it. And so I had this this realization, and it was interesting in how it came together. I'll share the story about that in a second. But I want to give you a couple of things that this whole experience has taught me that have given me more of that freedom. And I really do mean, whether or not you consider yourself a people pleaser, maybe you have other things you consider weaknesses. And I want to give you some freedom around those things and allow you just to really own them. Because I do believe that we are all wired a certain way for a purpose that helps us carry out our bigger purpose in the world. And for so long, I thought that this characteristic was something that I needed to change, only to realize on the other side of it that it actually is one of the things that makes me the most successful. Okay, so here are a couple of things that I learned, and I'll share the backstory a little bit too. So one of the things that has given me this new freedom around just being who I am and authentically stepping into that in every sense of the word is I had this conversation with a friend that brought me to the realization that my greatest weakness, quote unquote, is actually my greatest strength. The two are this, what is that saying? Two sides of the same coin? Something like that, right? The two are linked. So I'm going to share the story first, and then I'll kind of tie it to the background or my aha with it. So I was talking to this friend, and she was describing a situation where she was kind of beating herself up. She's like, man, I was so impulsive. I jumped the gun. I made that decision, and I was totally wrong. I misjudged the situation. And I said to her, interesting that you describe yourself as impulsive, because I see you as very decisive. I see that as one of your greatest strengths. And it was interesting. Sometimes our biggest lessons come from observing other people's lives, that in that moment when I was saying that to her, I realized, okay, wow, the same thing could be said of what I consider to be a weakness. She was saying that being impulsive was a weakness of hers, that she wished she would have been more thoughtful in making this big decision that she was making. And I looked at her from an outsider's perspective as someone who gets stuff done. She is decisive. She doesn't overthink things. And I saw that as one of her greatest strengths. Now, she was explaining a situation where she had maybe made an impulsive decision. So clearly the two were linked, but there was actually more strength in what she was describing than weakness. And so it made me think, wow, okay, I was just before this conversation almost going down this pity party route of, man, I get myself into so much trouble at times because I worry about what people think. So this people-pleasing nature, as we might call it. But then it had me stop and be like, okay, wait, well, in that same situation, what could I say about my own situation that is actually a strength? And when I looked at it, the truth is, one of the things that I think has contributed to any success I've had is I'm a natural connector. I genuinely love people. And when I'm in a healthy place with that trait, I am unstoppable. I can create relationships. I can create win-win situations. It has honestly contributed to everything that I've done so far. But on the other side of that, when I'm in an unhealthy place, when I'm allowing the less productive side of that characteristic to run the show and dipping into more of people-pleasing tendencies, then it tends to get me into trouble because I put too much emphasis on what other people think, or I make decisions for the wrong reason versus leading with what is aligned with my bigger purpose, what is true and authentic to me. And that's how that shows up in my life. So it was this interesting situation where I realized what I called one of my greatest weaknesses, something I thought I had to change, was actually connected to my biggest strength. They were one and the same. And so that kind of leads me to the second point that really started to give me some freedom around this, is that becoming the best version of myself meant developing a healthy self-awareness. Because it wasn't that I had to become less of something. I didn't need to become less of a people pleaser. I always laugh when people will use the phrase like, well, just don't care as much. Yeah, right. Tell a people pleaser not to care. That's like telling someone not to breathe air. It's like if you're someone who's maybe more decisive and, you could say that you're impulsive, that's like telling you to slow down and overthink things. It's not how you're naturally wired. So instead of thinking that I needed to become less of something, I instead learned through this realization to lean in to the best parts of how I'm wired, to the piece of, what some might call being a people pleaser that actually make me a really great connector and is the source of some of my greatest success, my greatest achievements. So learning to lean into the healthy side of it, but being hyper aware of when I'm dipping into the unhealthy habits of being a natural connector or someone who just genuinely loves to build relationships with people, really noticing when I'm dipping into the unhealthy side of that and making decisions based on, okay, will someone else like this? Will people approve? That isn't aligned with my bigger purpose. And those are the characteristics that I do want to maybe just over time have be less at the forefront. But deep down, in my nature, and one of the things I actually love most about myself is that I do love people. I love to connect. I don't want to take away the strength that characteristic brings me by saying to myself or telling myself the story that I just need to become less, I need to care less, I need to put less emphasis on caring for others, because that would truly take away some of the things that I really love best about my personality. So one of the ways that I've been able to bring this self-awareness in is to ask myself some great questions. So almost doing like a little self-check. And for fellow people pleasers, here is what I ask myself. If you're not a people pleaser, you can obviously come up with your own version of this. And really find a way to check in with yourself and notice when things feel off. Notice when you feel like you're dipping into unhealthy tendencies with whatever your strength is. So one of the things I ask myself is, am I making this decision or saying yes to a commitment in order to please someone else? Or is this really a hell yes for me? If you listen to the episode that we talked about saying no, that can often be really tough for someone who identifies as more of a people pleaser, or who, really wants to, they usually have a servant heart and they want to say yes, they want to contribute to others. But I really have to check in. And before I say an automatic yes, I have to do those exercises we talked about in that episode and ask myself, is this really a hell yes? Or am I making this decision? Do I want to say yes because I think it's going to make someone else happy? Those are two different things. And one of them aligns with the direction I want to go. The other does not. And then the second thing is, and this is like one of those deep-rooted patterns that I don't even think I was aware of for so much of my life, was in an interaction. So how I check in is I ask myself, what is my filter? So in an interaction with a person, sometimes I'll notice myself almost asking the question, okay, who do I need to be so this person will like me or approve of me? Or am I being my authentic self and just I'm willing to be okay with if someone doesn't like it? And when I started asking that question, I started to really pick up on when a desire to change who I was or even dull part of my own personality to make someone else comfortable was showing up, and just noticing it. So I think that the third piece of all of this, having freedom, finding just the space to be your authentic self, whatever that looks like, people pleaser, indecisive, decisive, impulsive, whatever words you use to describe your greatest strengths or greatest weakness, finding that freedom also involves having grace for yourself when you do dip into the unhealthy habits, because you're a human being, and I still will catch those old habits running the show. I still catch myself making decisions for the wrong reason or saying yes to things because I want to make someone else happy. And so whenever I find that internally everything kind of feels off and I'm realizing that maybe I'm saying a yes when it should have been a no, or I'm just putting way too much value on what other people think of me, when I notice those habits showing up again, I pause and I just check in and I say, okay, there that is again. And give it a little wave, and then decide to course correct. Because, so much of this is deep-rooted in patterns that we've developed over our entire life. So there's going to be those times when old habits show up, or maybe you're a little off your game, you're a little tired, and you just notice that things are not operating in alignment with where you ultimately want to go. And when that happens, the biggest thing you can do is have some grace for yourself, because we're not always going to get this right. We're not always going to get this perfect. But the more we develop that healthy self-awareness and are willing to check in and really ask ourselves, okay, am I in a healthy place with this strength of mine, or am I dipping into some unhealthy tendencies? That's where we ultimately find that freedom to be 100% who we are, 100% who we are not, and know that we are wired the way that we are for a purpose. And I do believe that. I believe that you are wired the way that you are. You have the characteristics, the strengths, the weaknesses that you have for a purpose, and you have all the qualities that you need to fulfill your purpose on this planet. So own it. The world absolutely needs what you have to offer. And when you step into it fully, you'll notice that it's very, very easy to distinguish when you're in your strength versus in your weakness, and have some grace for yourself regardless of where you are. So I'd love to hear from you and know if this topic today resonated with you. So many of you have commented on other episodes we've done that you really struggle with people-pleasing tendencies too. And even if you don't, I want to know, what did you take away that relates to something you considered a weakness at one point in your life? Because the more we can share this and let others know that they're not alone, the more that together we can support each and every person in stepping into that bigger purpose for themselves. So until next time, just remember, you don't have to do any of this alone.